British movie tone news. It's May 1932 and the cameras are at King's Cross to see the Flying Scotsman Express leave for Edinburgh. It will cover the 393-mile journey non-stop in 7 hours and 50 minutes, 25 minutes faster than the previous time. An event like this was headline news, for not only did express steam engines have a glamour and excitement all of their own, but railways were the unchallenged #1 for long-distance journeys. Aviation was in its infancy, while long-distance motoring was strictly for the well-to-do, and it was slow and prone to breakdown at that. Since Victorian times, there'd been great racing rivalry to Scotland between the East Coast Railway companies from King's Cross and the West Coast from Euston. Over the years, the honours came out about even, but any hint of speeding up of schedules was enough to bring the media out in force. The Flying Scotsman was, and indeed still is, the traditional name for the 10 o'clock departure from King's Cross. It's probably the world's most famous named train, and in the summer months it was so busy that it ran in 2 portions. The first, more glamorous train ran non-stop all the way to Edinburgh, while the second called at places like York and Newcastle. As well as being the name of a train, Flying Scotsman is also, of course, the name of a very famous locomotive, built in 1923 to the design of Nigel Gresley, with the 462 wheel arrangement. This was better known as a Pacific, the best known type for British Express engines. On November 30th, 1934, with a dynamometer car of instruments in the train to measure performance, Flying Scotsman reached the magic 100 miles an hour between Grantham and Peterborough. The first time this speed had been officially recorded. City of Truro's exploit 30 years before had been entirely unofficial. On withdrawal by British Railways in 1963, Flying Scotsman was purchased privately by Alan Pegler, and has since starred on many special trains, and indeed it's the world's most famous steam locomotive. Long, non-stop runs meant that steam locomotives needed to pick up water whilst on the move. This wavy sign warned locomotive crews that water troughs lay ahead, and that the firemen must be ready to wind down the pickup scoop beneath the tender. Troughs were laid between the rails every 40 or 50 miles or so on most of Britain's express main lines. They were just 6 inches deep, but up to half a mile long, with pumping stations nearby to refill them quickly between trains. At 60 miles an hour, this streamlined engine, one of Gresley's famous A4 class, like Mallard, will collect more than 2,000 gallons of water in just a few seconds. A soaking awaited anyone foolish enough to poke their head out of the window in the leading coaches. Slower and semi-fast services would use the troughs as well, like this one at Langley, near Stevenage. One railway that didn't use troughs was the Southern, where shorter distances generally meant that costs were not really justified. But to compensate, engines on the longer routes, like Waterloo to Exeter, had larger tenders, nicknamed water carts. This engine, a King Arthur class brand new in 1925, was about to be named Queen Guinevere. The King Arthurs were the Southern's crack passenger engines until the bullied Pacifics came along after 1941, and Sir Lamiel has survived into preservation as part of the National Collection. It too has a large tender, this time carried on 2 pivoted bogies. Heading an excursion on the former Southern lines, Sir Lamiel carries once again the white discs the Southern used to indicate, for signalman's benefit, the route a train was taking. Notice the third rail too, supplying power for electric trains, which began taking over from steam on the Southern around the time of the First World War. In the 1930s, the railway companies began a much more scientific method of testing their locomotives, using the most advanced technology of the day. Lord Nelson, who gave his name to the entire class, carries a removable shelter at the front, housing indicators, recording equipment and staff carried as part of the test. As a result of these tests, the Lord Nelsons were given modified blast pipes and bigger chimneys. These were intended to upgrade their performance. Lord Nelson is wearing the Southern's distinctive bright green malachite livery. This locomotive also is now part of the National Collection.